A Hunter in Teyvat, Chapter 39, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Me Lumen and as though carried by favorable winds, made our way back to Mondstadt with great time. Actually, the wind pushing us back into Mondstadt may very well have been Venti's doing. Am I going to attribute random geological things to certain gods now? Do I need to curse the hydro and electro archons when it rains? Either way, when we passed through a smaller series of mountains that made the divider between Mondstadt and Liyue, I noticed we were actually not that far from the Dawn Winery and the town that surrounded it. Here in the real world of Teyvat, towns like Springvale were far larger than shown in the game and were actually fairly well defended with a 5-foot thick and tall wall of stone and mortar that kept out hilichurls and other weak monsters. But here around the Dawn Winery was basically a company town, as the couple dozen households in the area all worked at Dialec's winery, which supplied its famous wine vintages across the world of Teyvat. How about we take a break for lunch and catch up with Dialec? I asked, as even I was getting tired of fueling our flight with my stomach growling in discontent at being ignored for the whole morning. Paimon thinks Jake is a genius, and didn't you say you wanted to see if you could trade that sword? Paimon asked, and I shook my head. For all I know, we will be sneaking over to Inazuma to go poke one of the Raiden Shogun statues, so having a sword that can make electro powers even stronger will be useful, I said, deciding to be a good world traveler and simply hoard my loot on the off chance I could use it. That, and I remembered on the way back that Beidou was an electro claymore user who would be willing to trade a great deal of treasures for a sword that perfectly suited her. Just getting a bit to stretch is good enough for me, Lumen said, and I couldn't help but agree, as sitting with someone on your lap certainly wasn't all that comfortable after an hour of that, so after 3 hours of flight, my legs were thoroughly numb. On the way back, how about we sit on Paimon's lap? I asked jokingly as we flew into the valley in which the Dawn Winery was, and our vision was filled with rolling fields of grape fields with a large mansion in the center of the valley. Hell, no, you two will squish Paimon to death. Paimon yelled, lightly punching me in the shoulder as she flew away from the two of us, as Lumen menacingly giggled at the thought. Rather than attempting to dismount from my Anemo elemental before dismissing it, I simply had it drop me a couple of feet from the ground as my stiff legs didn't want to move from their sitting position. Well, let's go see if Dialec is in, I said, ignoring the weird looks I got from Lumen and Paimon for my stiff walking, as I was wondering if Dialec was instead doing one of his many other tasks he liked to run, like being a bartender at a bar he owned in Mondstadt, cosplaying as Batman to defend Mondstadt from criminals, or could just be scouting the countryside for information. Excuse me, sir, do you know if the Dialec is in? We are acquaintances from Mondstadt, and we were wondering if we could speak to him. Lumen asked an older gentleman who was dressed sort of like a butler. The older man sadly shook his head before he spoke gently. I am afraid that the master of the house is currently busy with his private affairs, that took him off the grounds. Would you like me to share a message with him? I couldn't help but nod to the tactful reply the butler gave, as he literally gave no worthwhile information about his master, and it was perfectly possible, he simply lied as to where Dialec was at the moment. Very well, but no thank you, we will see him in Mondstadt in a couple of days. Anyway, do you mind if we eat our lunch over at that picnic table so we can return to Mondstadt well sated? I asked, pointing at said table with its chairs. Oh yes, of course, it's no problem at all. I will see myself to my prior tasks then. Have a pleasant trip back to Mondstadt, guests. The butler said, bowing to us before he turned around and went back inside the mansion. He partially lied. Dialec isn't here, but he knows where we could find him. Lumen muttered as we began eating our food. I figured he was simply denying the location, but how did you know? I asked, and Lumen told me she saw the man's ear twitch as he spoke and took it as a tell. I was once again reminded Lumen was a world-traveling hobo with more life experience than my past 9 generations of family put together. Well, either way, we aren't too close to him, so we should just head back to Mondstadt, where we can link back with the Knights of Favonius, I said, shrugging. The consequences of us actually not getting caught by the Knights of Favonius as we stole the Holy Lyre actually made it, so we weren't as close with Dialec, but on the other hand, with Venti pulling in the Knights more officially, we got their assistance, and we became closer to Eula and Noel, along with Amber being pulled into our missions as well. I knew all too well now that my actions had consequences for how things would happen in the future, as our actions in the Dragon's Pine Mountains and clearing out the Fatui encampment domain in Mondstadt had the Fatui amass inside Liyue, and a massive battle broke out between Liyue's forces and 2 harbingers, resulting in thousands of lives lost as the Fatui obviously scattered across Liyue, causing carnage. Once we finished our food and took a quick walk out of the Dawn Winery's lands in order to exercise our legs, we quickly flew the rest of the way back into Mondstadt, landing right on the edge of the large stone bridge that separated the island that Mondstadt city lied upon from the surrounding mainland. Oh yeah, I grabbed this, remember? I said in excitement as I pulled out the core of the ruined greater I killed. Let's go turn this in at the Adventurers Guild. Paimon is rich. Paimon called out excitedly as she recalled the massive bounty that was on ruined graters and ruined guards. No. I am rich, I just buy our team's mascot, food for morale support. I said blandly as we approached Catherine, who was standing in the kiosk in front of the guild building. Welcome, adventurers, do you have materials or quests to turn in? Catherine said respectfully, and I nodded, dropping the core of the ruined greater and a couple notable pieces of the mitachurl that survived it, fading into darkness. Catherine looked through a book and nodded, smiling as she explained that the mitachurl body parts have recently had an upsurge in demand, so they were worth more. So after we got a good chunk of mora, Catherine updated our adventurers card stating our levels had gone up. As we were finishing our business, I saw Catherine's sight surprisingly before she pointed towards the entrance of Mondstadt, seeing our surprised expressions. A young male teenager was literally smoking as his burnt form staggered through the gates of Mondstadt and over to us, or more specifically, why Catherine. HAA. Please excuse me, adventurers, I must speak to Mr. Bennett now. Catherine said, dismissing us, and as we moved away, I saw Bennett basically collapse against the desk of the kiosk as he and Catherine were speaking, and it was fairly obvious that the woman was clearly scolding him for getting hurt as the contrite teenager began dropping a pile of monster materials in the kiosk. Let's get going, Lumen said, pulling on our conjoined hands towards the Knights of Favonia's headquarters. After a few minutes of walking, we moved up towards the back half of the island city, and we entered the Knights of Favonia's building. Let's check in with Jean first, I spoke, squeezing Lumen's hand to stop walking forward to the library. Might as well see if there was some catastrophe that happened while we were gone for a day, and also Jean should know what happened while we were in Liyue. The fact that a legitimate war may break out, as how the battle between vision wielders broke out into the populace in Liyue, was certainly important news that Jean should get firsthand rather than wait for the news to trickle in from spies or other assets they had in Liyue. We knocked on the door to Jean's office, we heard her loudly call for us to come in. As we came into the office, I saw a number of knights and other people of note, consisting of Lisa Venti and, more importantly, Dialek were surrounding a table they brought into the office with a map of Mondstadt. Oh, and Eula, who was sitting beside Amber, blushed heavily at the sight of me, and I couldn't help but remember our not-so-innocent sleepover. Oh, we were just waiting for you both to get back. We have great news. Venti said excitedly, waving to us. What do you want, tone-deaf bard? Paimon said from behind us. But Venti completely ignored Paimon as he continued to speak. When Valen took the old capital as his lair when he woke back up from his deep slumber, I realized that as we killed abyss mages, that the barrier surrounding where the old capital was created disturbances in it. We can actually break into the storm barrier that surrounds it and reach Stormterror's lair, so we can try to purify Valen. Dialek hummed as he folded his arms across his chest as he looked to the Anemo Archon. Which means we're going to confront Valen. I am fine with that. Jean was the one who wanted to avoid any direct confrontation with him. Jean shook her head as she put her hand on her chest and spoke solemnly. No, when there are no other options left, it is my responsibility as acting Grand Master to deal with what needs to be done. Please subscribe to our channel and go to patreon.com/Azazyel to read all his stories.